Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What's your perfect night? Is it curling up on the couch for a cozy, peaceful night in? Therapy can feel a bit like that. Your comfort place where you replenish your energy. With BetterHelp, get matched with a therapist based on your needs entirely online. It's convenient and suited to your schedule. Find comfort this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com.
Thank you for being a valued supporter of the 10X Podcast Group. Your dedication means the world to us. Today, we bring you a gripping tale titled, Deadly Alliance. Your continued support and subscription fuel our passion for storytelling, and we deeply appreciate every moment you spend with us. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's compelling narrative. Chapter 1. The Accusation. The rain hammered against the windows, a steady drumbeat that echoed in the silence of Samantha Rainer's living room. She sat on the edge of the couch, her usually impeccable demeanor replaced by a frantic energy that made her seem almost unrecognizable. Her long auburn hair hung loose, strands sticking to her tear-streaked cheeks. Her hands trembled as she reached for her glass of wine, spilling a few crimson drops onto the white carpet. Across from her, Laura, Richard, and Emily exchanged uneasy glances. They had been summoned by Samantha's urgent text, "Emergency. Come now. Don't ask questions." The weight of those words still lingered, thick and oppressive like the storm outside. "They're saying I killed him," Samantha said finally, her voice cracking. She looked up, her green eyes wide and glistening. "Daniel. They think I killed Daniel." The words hit like a sledgehammer, leaving the room in stunned silence. "What?" Emily, ever the rational one, leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Who's saying this?" "The police." Samantha nodded, clutching the wine glass so tightly it seemed as though it might shatter. "They came to my office this afternoon. 2 detectives. They said I was the last person to see him alive. That I had a motive." Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands, letting out a muffled sob. Laura instinctively reached out, her maternal instincts taking over. "Sam, this is insane. Why would they think that? You would never." "I didn't." Samantha's head snapped up, her voice sharp and desperate. "I didn't kill him, Laura. I swear to you." "But why do they think you did?" Richard asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. He was slouched in his chair, nursing a glass of whiskey. His hands were steady, but his eyes betrayed the turmoil beneath. "There's gotta be a reason, Sam. People don't just accuse you of murder out of nowhere." Samantha hesitated, her gaze darting to the floor. "Daniel and we had a falling out," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was trying to cut me out of the company. Said I was too much of a liability. He was threatening to take everything I've worked for, and I told him I wouldn't let him." Emily's brow furrowed. "And that's their motive. A business dispute." "There's more," Samantha said, her voice trembling. They found my scarf in his apartment. It had blood on it." The room erupted in chaos. Laura gasped, covering her mouth in shock. Richard muttered a curse under his breath, while Emily's eyes narrowed, calculating. "Sam," Emily said slowly, Were you at his apartment? Yes, but Samantha stopped herself, her breath hitching. I was there that night, but I left before anything happened. I swear. Emily leaned back, her expression unreadable. That's going to be hard to prove. That's why I need you, Samantha said, her voice breaking again. She turned to each of them, her gaze pleading. You're my closest friends. You know me. You know I could never do something like this. Laura reached for Samantha's hand. Course we know that. But what can we do? How can we help? I need you to tell them I was with you that night, Samantha said, her voice trembling with urgency. If we all say I was with you, they won't have a case. They can't prove I wasn't. The room fell silent again, the gravity of her request settling over them like a dark cloud. Sam, Richard said cautiously, you're asking us to lie to the police. I'm asking you to save me, Samantha shot back, her voice sharp and desperate. They're trying to pin this on me because they have no one else. If you don't help me, I'll go to prison for something I didn't do. Laura's grip on Samantha's hand tightened. But what if they find out we're lying? We could all get in trouble. They won't, Samantha said quickly. They have nothing but circumstantial evidence. If we stick to the story, they can't prove anything. Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. This is insane. You're asking us to put everything on the line for you. I know, Samantha said, her voice softening. She looked at each of them, her green eyes glistening with unshed tears. But you're my family. I would do it for you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Slowly, Laura nodded, her maternal instinct to protect overriding her fear. "'Kay. I'll do it." Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This is a bad idea, but..." "Fine. I'll back you up." Emily was the last to speak, her expression hard and unreadable. "I'll help you," she said finally, her voice cold. "But if I find out you're lying to us, Sam, I swear." "I'm not," Samantha cut her off, her voice filled with conviction. "I promise you I'm not." But as the storm raged outside, drowning out the sound of her words, a flicker of doubt crossed Emily's face. And though none of them could have known it then, this moment would mark the beginning of their unraveling. Chapter 2: Cracks in the Alibi. The morning after their pact, the air seemed heavier. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp but unervingly quiet day. Samantha's friends had gone home, each of them grappling with the gravity of what they had agreed to. For Laura Michaels, the weight was almost unbearable. She stood in her modest kitchen, staring blankly at the coffee pot as it hissed and sputtered. Her 7-year-old son Jamie sat at the table, kicking his legs and humming a tune from his favorite cartoon. His innocence was a painful contrast to the guilt festering in her chest. "Mom, are you okay?" Jamie's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Yes, sweetie," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But the truth gnawed at her. She had agreed to lie to the police. For Samantha. For someone she thought she could trust. Yet, the little inconsistencies in Samantha's story kept replaying in her mind like a broken record. Why hadn't Samantha mentioned going to Daniel's apartment before? And why had her scarf been there, soaked in blood? Her phone buzzed on the counter, jolting her. It was a message from Samantha. "Thank you again for everything. I owe you my life. Lunch today." Laura stared at the screen, her stomach churning. She didn't respond. Across town, Richard Hale nursed a hangover in his dimly lit apartment. The whiskey he had sworn off months ago now sat half empty on the coffee table. He hadn't touched it since last night, but the mere sight of it was a reminder of how far he had fallen in just 24 hours. His phone rang and he groaned, grabbing it without checking the caller ID. "Yeah," he grunted. "Richard, it's Emily." Her tone was clipped, businesslike. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About Samantha. About last night." Richard rubbed his temples. "What's there to talk about? We agreed to back her up. End of story." "It's not that simple," Emily snapped. "She's hiding something. I can feel it." "Or maybe you're just overthinking it," Richard countered, though doubt crept into his voice. She's our friend, Emily. Friends help each other. I'm a lawyer, Richard. I've seen cases like this before. People lie to protect themselves, even to their friends. Richard didn't respond, his silence stretching uncomfortably over the line. I'm meeting her later, Emily said. I want you to come with me. Why? So you can interrogate her. Because I need to know if we're doing the right thing. Richard sighed. Fine. But if you start grilling her like one of your clients, I'm out. Samantha had chosen an upscale cafe for their lunch meeting, the kind of place with overpriced salads and waiters who spoke in hushed tones. She was already seated when Laura arrived, her polished demeanor back in place. The frantic, desperate woman from the night before was gone, replaced by the composed, charismatic Samantha they all knew. Laura! Samantha exclaimed, standing to embrace her. You look exhausted. Didn't you sleep? Not much, Laura admitted, sliding into the chair opposite her. I've been thinking. Samantha's smile faltered for a split second before she recovered. About last night. Laura nodded, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. Sam, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. Of course, Samantha said, her tone light but her eyes wary. Why didn't you tell us about going to Daniel's apartment earlier? And how did your scarf end up there? Samantha's expression tightened, and for a moment, Laura thought she might lash out. But then Samantha sighed, leaning forward conspiratorially. I didn't tell you because I didn't think it mattered, she said quietly. I went there to talk to him to try to smooth things over. But we argued and I left. As for the scarf, I don't know. Maybe I left it there by accident. Maybe someone planted it. All I know is I didn't hurt him. Laura searched Samantha's face, looking for cracks, for any sign that she was lying. But Samantha held her gaze, her expression earnest and unflinching. Before Laura could press further, Emily and Richard arrived. Emily's sharp eyes immediately took in the scene, noting the tension in Laura's posture and the guarded look on Samantha's face. Sorry we're late, Emily said briskly, taking a seat. Let's get to it. To what? Samantha asked, her tone wary. To the truth, Emily said, her voice cool and direct. Sam, I need you to tell us everything. No more half-truths, no more omissions. If we're going to put our necks on the line for you, we deserve the full story. Samantha's eyes narrowed, her mask of composure slipping slightly. I've already told you everything that matters. Have you? Emily pressed. Because the police think you had a motive.
Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
And your timeline doesn't completely add up. Samantha's lips thinned, and for a moment, Laura thought she might explode. But instead, Samantha leaned back in her chair, her expression cold and calculating. Are you saying you don't believe me? She asked, her voice like ice. I'm saying I need to be sure, Emily replied evenly. Because if you're lying, it's not just your life on the line. It's all of ours. Silence fell over the table, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. Finally, Samantha let out a bitter laugh. I see what's happening here. You're starting to doubt me. After everything we've been through, you're ready to throw me to the wolves. Nobody's throwing you anywhere, Laura said quickly, her voice shaky. We just need to know the truth. Samantha's gaze swept over them, her expression hard. Fine. You want the truth. Here it is. I'm innocent. And if you don't believe that, then maybe you're not the friends I thought you were. She stood abruptly, throwing a few bills on the table. Let me know when you've made up your minds. With that, she walked out, leaving the three of them in stunned silence. That night, as Laura lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Samantha's words had been convincing, but her behavior. There was something off about it. Something calculated. And then there was the scarf. Bloodstained, left behind. An accident or a trap? As sleep finally claimed her, Laura couldn't help but wonder, what if Samantha isn't as innocent as she claims? Chapter 3. A Web of Lies. Samantha Rainer's departure from the cafe left a trail of unease in her wake. For Laura, Richard, and Emily, the weight of their decision to protect her had begun to splinter under the strain of their doubts. The bonds of trust that had tied them together now felt like fraying threads, threatening to snap. Laura's growing doubts. Laura sat at her kitchen table that evening, the soft glow of the overhead light casting shadows across her weary face. A stack of bills lay untouched in front of her, but her mind was elsewhere. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Emily. We need to talk. Urgent. Moments later, Laura found herself sitting across from Emily in her living room, their hushed voices a stark contrast to the tension filling the space. She's hiding something, Emily began, her tone firm. I don't trust her. Laura hesitated, her maternal instincts clashing with her growing doubts. She's our friend, Emily. We can't just abandon her. I'm not saying we abandon her, Emily countered, her voice rising slightly. But we can't blindly follow her either. If we're caught lying, we're complicit. And for what? To protect someone who won't even tell us the full truth. Laura bit her lip, the memory of Samantha's icy demeanor at the cafe fresh in her mind. What do we do? Emily leaned forward, her sharp gaze piercing. We figure out what she's not telling us. We protect ourselves. Richard's dissent. Across town, Richard Hale stared at the whiskey bottle on his counter. The room was dark, save for the flickering glow of the television. The news anchor's voice droned on, recounting the latest developments in Daniel Cross's murder investigation. The mention of Samantha's name made his stomach turn. He picked up his phone and dialed her number, his fingers trembling slightly. The call went to voicemail. Sam, it's me. Look, I need to talk to you. Call me back. He ended the call, tossing the phone onto the couch beside him. As the silence enveloped him, his mind wandered to the moments he had spent with Samantha. Her laughter, her charm, the way she could make you feel like you were the most important person in the room. But now those memories felt tainted. Could she have really killed Daniel? And if she had, what did that make him for lying to protect her? The knock at his door startled him. He opened it to find Emily standing there, her expression grim. We need to talk, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Emily's discovery. Emily wasted no time, her words sharp and cutting. I looked into Daniel's financials. Richard blinked, caught off guard. How? I have connections, she said simply, waving off his question. Daniel had been funneling money out of the company for months. Tens of thousands. And guess who was listed as one of the beneficiaries? Samantha. Richard asked, his voice barely a whisper. Emily nodded. She knew. And she didn't just know, she benefited from it. That's her motive, Richard. If Daniel found out she was involved, he could have destroyed her. Richard sank onto the couch, running a hand through his hair. That doesn't prove she killed him. It doesn't, Emily admitted. But it proves she had a reason to.
Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
How to have fun, anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
And she didn't tell us about any of this. Richard looked up at her. His eyes filled with doubt. What are you saying? That we back out. I'm saying we protect ourselves, Emily said, her voice steady. Samantha's not the person we thought she was. And if she's lying about this, who knows what else she's hiding? Samantha's counterplay. That night, Samantha sat in her dimly lit apartment, a glass of wine in her hand and a smirk playing on her lips. She had seen the doubt in her friends' eyes, felt the shift in their loyalties. It was time to remind them who held the power. She picked up her phone and sent a series of messages, each one tailored to its recipient. To Laura. I hope Jamie's doing okay. He must be so proud to have such a strong mom. Let me know if you need help with anything, especially those overdue bills. To Richard. I know it's been hard for you lately. If you ever need to talk, or if you're struggling, you know I'm here for you. To Emily. You've always been the smartest one in the room. I couldn't do this without you. Thank you for believing in me. Each message was a calculated move, a reminder of their vulnerabilities and her role in their lives. By the time she set her phone down, her smirk had grown into a full smile. They would fall back in line. They always did. The investigation tightens. The next morning, Detective Marcus Hayes stood in his cluttered office, a file spread open on his desk. Samantha Rainer's name was circled in red, along with a series of notes and photographs. She's hiding something, he muttered to his partner, Detective Amanda Blake. Blake glanced at the file, her expression skeptical. And her friends. They all have alibis for her. Too convenient, Hayes said, tapping a photo of the group. Something's off. I can feel it. Blake sighed. Feelings don't win cases, Marcus. Evidence does. Then we find the evidence, Hayes said, his eyes narrowing. Because I guarantee you, one of them is going to crack. The first crack. Later that day, Laura received a call from the police station. They wanted to ask her a few follow-up questions. Her heart pounded as she agreed to come in, her mind racing. When she arrived, Detective Hayes greeted her with a disarming smile. Thanks for coming in, Ms. Michaels. This won't take long. But as the questions began, Laura felt the walls closing in. They asked about her relationship with Samantha, about the night of the murder, about inconsistencies in her timeline. And with each question, Laura felt her resolve weakening. By the time she left the station, her hands were shaking. She called Samantha as soon as she got into her car. They're asking more questions, Laura said, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can do this. You can, Samantha said firmly. You have to. Remember what's at stake. Laura nodded, her grip on the phone tightening. But as she ended the call, A single thought echoed in her mind. What if Samantha isn't worth the risk? The cracks in their alliance were widening, and Samantha could feel the balance of power shifting. But she wasn't about to let it slip away. Not when she had so much to lose. Chapter 4. The Turning Point. The tension among the group had reached a breaking point, and Samantha Rainer could feel it. Her friends were slipping away, their doubts chipping away at the trust she had so carefully cultivated. But Samantha wasn't one to sit idly by. She had spent her life perfecting the art of manipulation, and she wasn't about to let her empire of lies collapse now. Laura's confession. The weight of her guilt had become unbearable for Laura Michaels. She sat in her car outside Emily's apartment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. After a long moment, she exhaled and stepped out into the brisk evening air. Emily answered the door almost immediately, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Laura, what's going on?" "I need to talk to you," Laura said, her voice trembling. "I can't do this anymore." Emily stepped aside, letting her in. "What do you mean?" Laura sat on the edge of the couch, her hands fidgeting nervously. "I went to the police today. They asked me more questions about Samantha, about that night." Emily's eyes narrowed. "What did you tell them?" "I stuck to the story," Laura said quickly, her voice desperate. "But, Emily, I don't know how much longer I can keep lying. What if they find out? What if they already know?" Emily crossed her arms, pacing the room. "We need to be smart about this. Samantha is counting on us." "Is she?" Laura blurted out. "Or is she just using us? Think about it, Emily. She's lied to us before. What if she's lying about this too?" Emily stopped pacing, her gaze fixed on Laura. "Then we find out the truth. And if she's lying, we protect ourselves." Richard's breakdown. Richard Hale was unraveling faster than either of them knew. He sat alone in his darkened apartment, a glass of whiskey in his hand and the faint sound of a police scanner playing on the counter. His paranoia had taken hold, and every mention of Daniel Cross or Samantha Rainer sent his heart racing. When his phone buzzed, he jumped, nearly spilling his drink. It was a message from Samantha. "We need to meet. Tonight. My place." Richard stared at the screen, dread pooling in his stomach. He didn't want to face her, didn't want to hear more of her reassurances or thinly veiled threats. But he knew he had no choice. The confrontation. That night, the four of them gathered at Samantha's apartment. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with unspoken accusations. Samantha greeted them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice smooth and controlled. "I know things have been stressful, but I need you to trust me." Emily was the first to speak, her tone sharp. "Trust you? Sam, we've been lying to the police for you, putting everything on the line for you. And you still haven't told us the full truth." Samantha's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "I've told you everything you need to know." "No, you haven't," Emily shot back. "What about the money Daniel was funneling out of the company? And the fact that some of it went to you?" Samantha's expression hardened, her mask slipping. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to us, Sam," Emily said, stepping closer. "We're not stupid." Laura shifted uncomfortably, her gaze darting between them. "Emily, maybe we should." "No," Emily interrupted, her voice firm. "We deserve answers." Samantha's eyes flicked to Richard, who sat silently in the corner, nursing another drink. "What about you, Richard? Do you believe I'm lying too?" Richard looked up, his eyes bloodshot and weary. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Sam." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, Samantha sighed, her shoulders sagging as if under the weight of the world. "Fine," she said, her voice low. "You want the truth. Yes, Daniel was funneling money. And yes, I benefited from it. But I didn't kill him. He was threatening to expose me, to ruin me. I went to his apartment that night to talk him out of it. We argued and I left. That's the last time I saw him alive. And the scarf? Emily pressed. Samantha's jaw tightened. I don't know how it ended up there. Maybe he grabbed it during the argument. Maybe someone else planted it. All I know is I didn't kill him. Laura spoke up, her voice shaky. Sam, if we're going to keep helping you, we need to know for sure. Did you kill him? Samantha's gaze swept over them, her green eyes blazing. No, she said firmly. I didn't. But the conviction in her voice didn't erase the doubt lingering in their minds. A shadow of betrayal. As the group dispersed, Emily lingered behind, her mind racing. She had seen the cracks in Samantha's story, the subtle tells in her body language. Samantha was hiding something. Of that, Emily was certain. The moment Samantha closed the door, Emily pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Detective Hayes, she said when the line connected. I have information about Samantha Rainer. Samantha's realization. Samantha stood in her living room, staring at the door long after Emily had left. She could feel the shift in the air, the unraveling of her carefully constructed web of lies. Her friends were no longer her allies. They were liabilities. She walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. Her reflection stared back at her, a reminder of the lengths she had gone to protect herself. She wasn't about to let anyone ruin that. Not Laura, not Richard, and certainly not Emily. Picking up her phone, she began typing a new message, her fingers moving with calculated precision. We need to meet. Tomorrow. All of us. Things are getting out of hand, and I have a plan to fix it. She hit send, her smirk returning. If they wanted to doubt her, she'd remind them just how far she was willing to go to stay in control. Detective Hayes gets a lead. Detective Hayes hung up the phone, his mind buzzing with Emily's information. Samantha Rainer wasn't just a suspect. She was the key to unraveling this case. And now he had someone on the inside. This is it, Hayes said to his partner, Amanda Blake. We're finally going to get her. The wheels were in motion, and the delicate balance of trust and manipulation Samantha had maintained was beginning to crumble.
Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates, and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
But Samantha Rainer wasn't done playing her game. Not yet. Chapter 5. Unraveling Truths. The air was tense as the group reconvened at Samantha's apartment the next evening. Despite her confident demeanor, Samantha felt the weight of the shifting dynamics. Emily's piercing gaze, Laura's anxious fidgeting, and Richard's distant expression all pointed to one undeniable fact. Her control was slipping. But Samantha was always prepared for moments like these. She had spent her life perfecting the skillful art of manipulation, and tonight, she intended to remind them of why they had followed her this far. A delicate setup. Samantha welcomed them with an effortless smile, the picture of composure. Her apartment was impeccably tidy, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing beneath the surface. She gestured for them to sit, pouring glasses of wine as though hosting an ordinary gathering. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice warm and reassuring. "I know things have been difficult, but I want to clear the air." Emily leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. "Do you? Or is this just another performance?" Samantha's smile faltered for only a moment before she recovered. "I understand your doubts, Emily. But everything I've done has been to protect myself, and by extension, all of you. If I go down, we all do." Laura shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Samantha's gaze. Richard stared into his wine glass, his silence heavy. "I've been thinking," Samantha continued, her tone measured. "We need to strengthen our story. The police are starting to look for inconsistencies, and if we're not careful, they'll tear us apart. And whose fault is that?" Emily shot back. "If you'd been honest with us from the start." "I have been honest," Samantha interrupted, her voice sharp. "I didn't kill Daniel." Emily's eyes narrowed. "Then why does everything about this scream cover up the hidden envelope?" As the argument escalated, Laura's voice broke through the tension, trembling but firm. "Enough. Fighting won't help us. We need to figure out what we're going to do." Samantha seized the moment, softening her tone. "Laura's right. We can't afford to let doubt divide us." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, placing it on the table. "I've been holding on to this, but I think it's time you all see it." The group leaned in as Samantha opened the envelope, revealing a series of photographs. The images showed a shadowy figure entering and leaving Daniel's apartment building the night of the murder. The timestamp on the images matched the approximate time of Daniel's death. "That's not me," Samantha said, her voice trembling. "I don't know who it is, but this could be the real killer." Emily's skepticism was palpable. "And where did you get these?" "They were sent to me anonymously," Samantha replied. "Left in my mailbox this morning." Emily snorted. "Convenient." Richard, however, seemed intrigued. "If it's not her, then who? Maybe the police need to see this." "No," Samantha said quickly, her eyes flashing with urgency. "If we give this to the police, they'll ask where it came from. They'll think I'm trying to shift blame. We need to figure out who this is before they do." The group fractures. Emily stood abruptly, pacing the room. "This is insane. First we're lying for you. Now you want us to play detective. What's next, Sam? Covering up another crime?" "Emily," Laura began, but Emily cut her off. "No, Laura. I'm done. Samantha can dig her own grave." Emily grabbed her coat, turning to face Samantha one last time. "If you're innocent, prove it. But don't drag us down with you." With that, she stormed out, leaving an uneasy silence in her wake. Samantha turned to Laura and Richard, her voice soft. "She'll come around. But we need to stay united." Richard finally spoke, his voice slurred. "What if she doesn't? What if she goes to the cops?" "She won't," Samantha said firmly. But the doubt in her eyes betrayed her confidence. Emily's betrayal. Outside, Emily stood on the street, her breath visible in the cold night air. She pulled out her phone and dialed Detective Hayes. "It's me," she said when he answered. "I have more for you." Hayes's voice was calm but eager. "Go on." "Samantha just showed us photos of someone entering Daniel's apartment. She claims they were sent to her anonymously, but it's all too convenient. I think she's trying to throw us off." Hayes scribbled notes as she spoke. "And the others? Where do they stand?" "They're cracking," Emily admitted. "But they're still following her lead. For now." Hayes paused, his tone measured. "If you're sure about this, Emily, you need to be ready. Once we move on Samantha, you might have to testify." "I'll do what I have to," Emily said, her voice firm. "But you need to act fast. She's slipping, and I don't trust what she'll do next." Samantha's counterstrike. Samantha paced her apartment long after Laura and Richard had left. The photographs were spread across the table, their existence a calculated gamble. She knew Emily wouldn't buy the story, but she also knew Emily's distrust could be weaponized. Picking up her phone, Samantha began typing a message. To Laura. I'm worried about Emily. She's been acting strange, and I think she might be talking to the police. We need to stick together. To Richard. Emily's losing it. If she goes to the cops, we're all in trouble. Stay close to Laura. We need to keep an eye on her. She hit send and smiled. Let Emily think she was in control. Samantha had no intention of letting her win. Detective Hayes closes in. Detective Hayes stared at the photographs Emily had sent over, his mind racing. The figure in the images was indistinct, their face obscured, but the timestamps aligned perfectly with the timeline of the murder. She's spinning a new story, he said to his partner, Detective Blake. But why? Blake studied the photos, her expression thoughtful. If she's innocent, this could be a lead. If she's guilty, it's a distraction. Hayes nodded. Either way, it's time we put the pressure on her. The delicate balance of trust and manipulation Samantha had maintained was crumbling. Emily's betrayal, Laura's growing doubts, and Richard's instability were pushing her closer to the edge. But Samantha wasn't done playing the game, and she still had one card left to play. Chapter 6. The Betrayal. Samantha Rainer sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, her phone resting on the table like a loaded weapon. The messages she had sent to Laura and Richard earlier that night were a calculated strike, meant to drive a wedge between them and Emily. But as the hours ticked by, a gnawing unease began to creep in. Samantha had always been in control, but now, for the first time, she felt the game slipping from her grasp. Emily's resolve. Emily Carter stood outside the police station, her breath visible in the cold night air. She had spent the past hour pacing the sidewalk, replaying her decision over and over in her mind. Betraying Samantha felt like crossing an unspoken line, but the evidence against her old friend was becoming impossible to ignore. Finally, she stepped inside, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Detective Marcus Hayes greeted her with a nod, his sharp eyes narrowing in on her tense posture. Emily, he said, gesturing to a seat. I wasn't expecting you back so soon. Emily sat down, her back straight and her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I have more information. But first I need to know something. If I cooperate, what happens to me? Hayes leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. That depends on what you tell us. If you've been complicit, you'll have to own up to it. But if you help us take Samantha down, the DA might be willing to cut a deal. Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Then let's talk. Richard's spiral. Across town, Richard Hale was spiraling. The texts from Samantha had lit a fire of paranoia in his already fragile mind. He sat in his darkened apartment, nursing yet another drink, his thoughts racing. Emily. He had always trusted her, admired her sharp mind and unwavering confidence. But Samantha's message had planted a seed of doubt that was quickly taking root. What if Emily was talking to the police? What if she turned on all of them? Richard couldn't shake the thought, and as the hours passed, his paranoia grew. Finally, he grabbed his coat and left the apartment, his steps unsteady as he headed for Laura's house. Laura's dilemma. Laura Michaels was pacing her living room when Richard arrived, his eyes bloodshot and his movements erratic. She opened the door, her heart sinking at the sight of him. Richard, she said, stepping aside to let him in. What's wrong? She's turning on us, Richard said, his voice slurred. Emily. Samantha says she's talking to the cops. Laura's stomach churned. She had received the same message from Samantha but hadn't wanted to believe it. Emily was logical, precise. Surely she wouldn't betray them. But then again, hadn't she been the one asking the most questions, pushing the hardest for answers? We don't know that for sure, Laura said, trying to keep her voice steady. Richard shook his head, his hands trembling. We can't risk it. If she talks, we're screwed. Laura bit her lip, torn between loyalty and self-preservation. What do we do? Richard looked at her, desperation in his eyes. We need to confront her. Tonight. The confrontation. Emily was just returning home when Laura and Richard arrived, their faces grim and their energy charged with tension. She froze in the doorway, her lawyer instincts immediately on high alert. "What are you two doing here?" she asked, her tone cautious. "We need to talk," Richard said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Laura followed, her movements hesitant. Emily closed the door behind them, crossing her arms as she faced them. "About what?" "Samantha thinks you're talking to the cops," Richard said bluntly. "Are you?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "You came all the way here to ask me that." "We need to know where you stand," Laura added, her voice quieter but no less insistent. "If you've turned on us." "Turned on you?" Emily interrupted, her voice rising. "You think I'm the traitor? Open your eyes, Laura. Samantha's the one lying to all of us." Richard stepped closer, his voice shaking. "If you've gone to the cops, you need to tell us. Now." Emily glared at him, her frustration boiling over. "And what if I have? Maybe someone needs to hold her accountable." Laura gasped, and Richard's face darkened. "You did, didn't you?" he said, his voice filled with betrayal. "I'm doing what's necessary," Emily said, her voice steady but cold. "If you two are too blind to see what's right in front of you, that's your problem." Samantha's plan. Meanwhile, Samantha was carefully laying the groundwork for her next move. She sat at her desk, her laptop open to a document filled with meticulous notes. Each entry detailed the weaknesses and secrets of her so-called friends. She had always been prepared to use them as leverage, but now the time had come to play her hand. She began drafting an anonymous email to Detective Hayes, attaching the photos she had shown the group. The email painted Emily as the shadowy figure in the images, subtly implicating her in Daniel's murder. As she clicked send, Samantha leaned back in her chair, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. If Emily wanted to play games, Samantha would make sure she lost. Detective Hayes closes in. At the police station, Detective Hayes reviewed the email that had just landed in his inbox. The photos were the same ones Emily had described, but the message that accompanied them was different. The anonymous sender suggested that Emily Carter had been seen entering Daniel Cross's apartment on the night of the murder. Hayes frowned, his instincts telling him this was another layer of the game Samantha was playing. But even so, the new lead was worth following up. "Looks like things just got more interesting," Hayes muttered to his partner, Detective Blake. The breaking point. As the night wore on, the cracks in their alliance deepened. Laura, torn between her loyalty to Samantha and her growing mistrust of Emily, found herself unable to sleep. Richard, fueled by paranoia and alcohol, was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. And Emily, now fully aware of the danger she was in, began preparing her own counterstrike. Meanwhile, Samantha watched from the shadows, pulling the strings with a precision born of desperation and brilliance. She wasn't just fighting to stay out of prison, she was fighting to win. And in her world, winning meant leaving no one unscathed. The game was far from over, but the stakes had never been higher. One wrong move could send everything and everyone crashing down.
Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates, and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
Hey, it's Ryan Seacrest. Life comes at you fast, which is why it's important to find some time to relax. A little you time Enter Chumba Casino. With no download required, you can jump on anytime, anywhere for the chance to redeem some serious prizes. So treat yourself with Chumba Casino and play over 100 online casino-style games, all for free. Go to ChumbaCasino.com to collect your free welcome bonus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Chapter 7. The Ultimate Manipulation. Samantha Rainer sat in her apartment, her mind working at breakneck speed. The delicate balance she had maintained was gone. Emily's betrayal, Richard's instability, and Laura's wavering trust were threads threatening to unravel her entire plan. But Samantha wasn't finished. She thrived in chaos, and this was where she did her best work. Emily makes a move. The morning light filtered through Emily Carter's window as she sat at her desk, organizing the files she had been collecting. She had sent Detective Hayes everything she could, but Samantha's counterplay was evident in the questions Hayes had asked during their last call. "They think I'm involved," Emily whispered to herself, her voice filled with frustration. Samantha had struck back and it was working. A knock on her door startled her. She opened it to find Laura standing there, her face pale and drawn. "Laura," Emily said, stepping aside to let her in. "What's going on?" Laura hesitated before speaking. "I don't know who to trust anymore, Emily. Samantha says you've gone to the police, but I can't believe you'd betray us." Emily's eyes narrowed. "And you came here to find out if it's true?" Laura nodded, her gaze pleading. "I need to know. Are you working with them?" Emily sighed, motioning for Laura to sit. "I won't lie to you. Yes, I've been talking to Detective Hayes. But it's not what Samantha is making it out to be. I'm trying to protect us from her." Laura's hands trembled as she clasped them in her lap. "Protect us how?" "Samantha is lying," Emily said, her voice firm. "She's manipulating all of us to save herself. You know it, Laura. Deep down you know it." Laura looked away, tears glistening in her eyes. I don't know what to do." "Help me," Emily urged. "If we work together, we can expose her for what she really is." Richard's collapse. Richard Hale was spiraling further into paranoia. The messages from Samantha had planted seeds of doubt, and his encounter with Emily had only watered them. He sat alone in his apartment, the remnants of last night's drinking binge littering the coffee table. His phone buzzed with another message from Samantha. "Emily's playing both sides. Be careful what you say to her." Richard threw the phone across the room, the sound of it hitting the wall echoing through the silence. He couldn't take it anymore. The lies, the manipulation, the constant feeling that he was being watched. Grabbing his coat, Richard stormed out of the apartment, heading for Samantha's place. He needed answers, and he wasn't leaving until he got them. The meeting. By evening, all four of them found themselves back in Samantha's apartment, tension crackling like static electricity. Samantha had called the meeting, her tone in the group chat urgent and unyielding. "Thank you for coming," Samantha began, her voice smooth and controlled. She stood at the head of the room like a conductor about to orchestrate a symphony. "We need to get back on the same page. This infighting is exactly what the police want." Emily crossed her arms, her expression cold. "And whose fault is that, Sam? You're the one pulling the strings." Samantha's eyes narrowed. "I've done nothing but protect us, Emily. You, on the other hand, have been talking to the cops." Richard tensed, his gaze flicking between them. "Is that true?" Emily met his eyes, her voice steady. "I've been trying to figure out the truth. Unlike Sam, I'm not hiding anything." Samantha's laugh was bitter. "That's rich coming from you. What about the email I received? Anonymous, but oh so detailed about my supposed involvement." "That wasn't you." Emily stiffened. "What email?" Samantha walked to her desk, pulling out printed pages. She handed them to Richard and Laura, her expression triumphant. "As an attempt to frame me for something I didn't do. And I think we all know who's responsible." Laura scanned the pages, her hands trembling. "Emily, did you send this?" "No," Emily said firmly, her voice filled with anger. "She's trying to set me up." Richard shook his head, his voice slurring slightly. This is insane. We're tearing each other apart." "That's exactly what she wants," Samantha said, her voice calm but cutting. "She's trying to save herself by throwing us under the bus." Samantha's masterstroke. As the argument escalated, Samantha moved to the kitchen, pretending to prepare coffee while secretly activating the recording device hidden in her drawer. Every word they were saying was being captured, a new layer of insurance for her. Returning to the living room, she placed a tray of cups on the table, her demeanor composed. "We can argue all night or we can focus on the real problem, the police. They're closing in, and if we don't stick together, we're all going down." Laura's voice wavered. "But what if they're right, Sam? What if you're not telling us everything?" Samantha's gaze softened, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. "Laura, I swear to you I didn't kill Daniel. But if you can't trust me, then this is all over." The room fell silent, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. Finally Laura nodded, though her eyes were filled with uncertainty. "'Kay. I'll stick with you." Samantha turned to Richard, who nodded mutely, his face pale. Only Emily remained defiant, her gaze locked on Samantha with unyielding suspicion. "This isn't over," Emily said, her voice low but steady. Samantha smiled, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "It is if you want it to be." The police close in. At the station, Detective Hayes reviewed the latest recording Emily had provided. It painted Samantha as controlling, manipulative, but not outright guilty. The lack of concrete evidence was frustrating, but Hayes could feel the walls closing in. "We need a direct confrontation," Hayes said to Detective Blake. "Pressure her until she cracks." "And if she doesn't?" Blake asked. "She will," Hayes said, his voice filled with certainty. "They always do." The game had reached its tipping point. Samantha had played her cards with precision, but the cracks in her plan were growing wider. With the police closing in and her friends teetering on the edge of betrayal, the next move would determine everything. Chapter 8. The Final Play. Samantha Rainer sat in her apartment, the room bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp. She sipped her wine, her thoughts razor-sharp. The walls were closing in. Emily's betrayal, the police's persistence, and her friend's faltering trust all converged like storm clouds. But Samantha wasn't done. Not yet. Her next move would be bold. Had to be. This was no longer about survival, it was about control. The police strike. Detective Marcus Hayes arrived at Samantha's apartment with his partner, Amanda Blake. They had spent the night piecing together the web of evidence Emily had provided, but it still wasn't enough to arrest Samantha outright. They needed a confession, or at least a crack in her polished armor. "Stay sharp," Hayes said as they walked up to her door. "She's not going to make this easy." Samantha opened the door before they could knock, her smile wide and welcoming. "Detectives, to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "We need to ask you a few more questions," Hayes said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Samantha's smile didn't falter. "Course. Anything to help." The interrogation. The detective settled in the living room, Hayes sitting across from Samantha while Blake leaned against the wall, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of the space. "Let's cut to the chase," Hayes began. "We know you were at Daniel Cross's apartment the night he died." "I've already told you," Samantha said smoothly. "We argued and I left. Alive. And yet your scarf was found at the scene, covered in his blood," Hayes said, his tone sharp. "Care to explain that?" Samantha leaned back, her expression calm. "I can't. I've told you everything I know." Hayes pulled out a folder and placed it on the coffee table. Inside were photos of the shadowy figure entering and leaving Daniel's apartment. He slid them toward Samantha. "This isn't you?" he asked. Samantha glanced at the photos, her face impassive. "It's not." Hayes leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "We also know you've been manipulating your friends, turning them against each other." "Why, Samantha?" What are you hiding? For the first time, Samantha's mask cracked, just slightly. Her green eyes flicked to the photos before returning to Hayes. What I'm hiding, she said slowly, is the truth about who really killed Daniel. Samantha's counterplay. The detectives exchanged a glance. Hayes raised an eyebrow, signaling Samantha to continue. Daniel wasn't exactly a saint, Samantha said, her voice steady but tinged with bitterness. He had enemies. Lots of them. People who wanted him gone. I went to his apartment that night to warn him, to tell him that someone was after him. But he didn't listen. Blake folded her arms. And who exactly was after him? Samantha hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window. There's someone you should be talking to. Someone who had far more to lose if Daniel exposed him. Who? Hayes demanded. Samantha turned back to them, her expression resolute. I'll tell you, but only if you guarantee immunity. Hayes's jaw tightened. That's not how this works. Then I guess we're done here, Samantha said, standing. Thank you for stopping by. Blake stepped forward. You think you're untouchable, don't you? But here's the thing, Samantha. We're not going away. And your friends. They're not going to keep covering for you. Samantha smiled, her composure fully restored. We'll see. Emily's revelation. Across town, Emily sat in her apartment, staring at the files she had collected. Something about the timeline wasn't adding up. Samantha's alibi, the photos, the anonymous email. It was all too convenient. And then it hit her. The shadowy figure in the photos wasn't Samantha. It wasn't even a woman. Emily grabbed her phone and called Detective Hayes. I've got something. Meet me at the station. Laura breaks. Meanwhile, Laura Michaels was unraveling. The pressure of lying to the police, the fear of being exposed, and the guilt of protecting Samantha were too much to bear. She sat in her car outside the station, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Finally, she stepped out, her mind made up. It was time to tell the truth. A showdown. Back at Samantha's apartment, Richard arrived unannounced, his face pale and drawn. Samantha greeted him with a wary smile. Richard, she said, stepping aside to let him in. What brings you here? I can't do this anymore, Sam, Richard said, his voice trembling. Emily's right. You've been lying to us. Samantha's eyes narrowed. Richard, you're drunk. Go home and sleep this off. No, he said, his voice rising. I need the truth. Before Samantha could respond, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Hayes and Blake standing there, their expressions grim. Samantha Rainer, Hayes said, his tone formal. We need you to come with us. For what? Samantha asked, her voice calm but her eyes flashing with anger. We have new evidence, Blake said. And your friends. They're done covering for you. Twist. At the station, Emily, Laura, and Richard were brought into separate rooms for questioning. Piece by piece, their stories unraveled. Laura admitted to the lies, Richard confessed his doubts, and Emily presented the evidence that pointed to someone else entirely. By the end of the night, the detectives had a new suspect, Daniel's business associate, who had been embezzling money and had the most to lose if Daniel exposed him. But Samantha wasn't entirely innocent. Her manipulation, her lies, and her attempt to frame Emily had consequences. She was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy, her web of deceit finally catching up to her. The fallout. Months later, Emily, Laura, and Richard met for coffee. Their relationships forever changed. The scars of Samantha's betrayal lingered, but they had survived. As for Samantha, she sat in a prison cell, her charm and wit no longer enough to save her. But even behind bars, she smiled to herself. She had lost the game, but she had played it masterfully until the end.
Every day when you log into ChumbaCasino.com, the ultimate online social casino, you get a free daily bonus. Imagine if you got daily bonuses in other parts of your life.
I chose French fries over loaded French fries.
I asked Stuart from accounting about his weekend, even though I don't care.
I updated my operating system without having to call tech support.
Collect your free daily bonus at ChumbaCasino.com now. and live the Chumba life. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Over the last 75 years, over 10,000 chemicals have been introduced to our food supply. Yet the EU only allows 300 food additives. But at Thrive Market, we bring our members the highest quality brands and restrict more than 1,000 ingredients found at conventional grocery stores, making the switch as easy with our Healthy Swaps scanner, which finds better versions of all your favorite pantry, snacking, and home essentials without the added junk, dyes, and fillers. Plus, it's all delivered straight to your door. So if you're looking to shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health, go to thrivemarket.com/podcast and you'll get 30% off your first order and a free gift.